The rain poured down on the cemetery as Thomas stood beside Charles's casket, his heart shattered. "You're just a gold digger who never loved him," Charles's sister yelled, pointing an accusing finger, and the crowd murmured in agreement. But when the lawyer stood up to read the will, a heavy silence fell over the entire gathering, changing everything Thomas thought he knew about love and acceptance. 2 years earlier, Thomas had walked into a small coffee shop in downtown Manhattan on a crisp October morning, clutching his sketchbook like a shield. At 28, he still felt like an outsider in the city he had fled to from his conservative Texas hometown. His parents back home kept texting him about settling down with a nice girl, never suspecting the truth he buried deeper every day. He ordered a black coffee and found the only empty table by the window. That's when Charles slid into the chair across from him without asking. "Mind if I join you? This place is packed, and you look like you could use some company," Charles said with an easy smile that reached his blue eyes. He was 35, tall and confident in a tailored navy coat, the kind of man who designed skyscrapers for a living and carried himself like the world owed him nothing. Thomas hesitated, then nodded. They talked for 2 hours, about architecture, about bad art movies, about the way the city lights made everything feel possible at night. Charles listened like every word mattered. When Thomas mentioned his graphic design job that barely paid rent, Charles didn't flinch. Instead, he asked for Thomas's number. Their first date was simple, a walk through Central Park at dusk. Charles pointed out buildings he had helped design, his voice warm with passion. Thomas felt something loosen in his chest for the first time in years. When Charles reached for his hand under the cover of twilight, Thomas didn't pull away. The kiss that followed, soft and unhurried on a quiet bench, tasted like freedom. "I've been waiting for someone real," Charles whispered against his lips. Thomas believed him. Weeks turned into months. They spent weekends at Charles's spacious loft in Brooklyn, cooking pasta and laughing over old vinyl records. Thomas began to sketch Charles while he worked at his drafting table, strong jaw, gentle hands, the way his brow furrowed when he concentrated. For the first time, Thomas didn't hate the part of himself he had hidden since high school. Charles never pushed, never demanded labels. He just showed up, steady and sure. One night after a quiet dinner, Charles pulled Thomas close on the couch. "You don't have to figure everything out tonight," he said. "Just know I'm here." Thomas buried his face in Charles's shoulder and let himself believe it was possible to be loved exactly as he was. But back in Texas, his mother's calls grew insistent. "When are you bringing a girl home, Tommy? Your father worries." Thomas lied smoothly, saying he was too busy. The guilt gnawed at him, but the joy with Charles outweighed it. Mark, his closest friend from art school, was the only one who knew. "You deserve this happiness, man," Mark told him over beers one evening. "Charles is good for you." Thomas smiled, unaware that the first cracks were already forming beneath the surface. By Christmas, Thomas had practically moved in. They decorated a small tree together, Charles teasing him about his lopsided ornaments. Under the twinkling lights, Charles gave him a silver watch engraved with their initials inside. "Time starts over when you're with the right person," he said. Thomas's eyes stung. He had never felt so seen. Yet in quiet moments, doubt crept in. Charles's world was so polished, so far from the modest life Thomas had known. Was he enough? The question lingered, but Charles's kisses always chased it away. New Year's Eve brought fireworks over the Brooklyn Bridge. They stood on the rooftop, Charles's arms wrapped around him from behind. "This is just the beginning," Charles murmured. Thomas leaned back, heart full, convinced the future held only light. Little did he know how quickly that light could be tested. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms and the first real test of their bond. Thomas's boss at the design firm announced layoffs, and suddenly his paycheck vanished. Charles offered to cover the rent without hesitation. "It's not charity," he insisted when Thomas protested. "It's partnership." They argued gently at first, then laughed it off over takeout Thai food. Thomas started freelancing from the loft, sketching logos late into the night while Charles reviewed blueprints. The routine felt domestic, safe. One weekend they drove upstate to a cabin Charles owned. No cell service, just woods and a crackling fireplace. They hiked trails where Charles pointed out rare birds, his knowledge endless. At night they sat on the porch, Thomas resting his head on Charles's chest, listening to his heartbeat. I never thought I'd have this, Thomas admitted. Charles kissed his forehead. You have it now. And it's real. For those 48 hours, the outside world disappeared. Thomas sketched Charles asleep by the fire, capturing the peace on his face. Back in the city, reality intruded. Thomas's sister called from Texas, excited about her upcoming wedding. You have to bring someone special, she said. The implication hung heavy. Thomas hung up and stared at the wall. Charles noticed immediately. Tell them when you're ready. Or don't. Your choice. But the pressure built. At a gallery opening Mark dragged them to, Thomas froze when an old college acquaintance asked if he was dating anyone. Charles squeezed his hand under the table, but Thomas pulled away slightly, shame flooding him. Later that night, he apologized in the dark. I hate hiding you. Charles held him tighter. One day you won't have to. Their first real fight came in May. Charles's wealthy family invited him to a charity gala in the Hamptons. Bring your boyfriend, his mother had written in the email. Thomas panicked. What if they see I'm not like them? Charles sighed. They'll see the man I love. They went anyway. The evening was elegant, champagne flowing, but Thomas felt every stare. Charles's sister, Elena, cornered him by the bar. So how did you two meet? Charles has expensive tastes. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Thomas laughed it off, but the comment lodged like a splinter. On the drive home, he snapped. Maybe I am just riding your success. Charles pulled over on the dark highway. Don't you ever say that. I fell for you the day you spilled coffee on your sketchbook and laughed about it. Not your bank account. They kissed under the car light, forgiveness easy. Summer brought lazy Sundays and deeper intimacy. Thomas met Charles's inner circle, loyal friends who welcomed him without question. One night at a rooftop party, Mark pulled Thomas aside. You've changed for the better, bro. Charles is the real deal. Thomas believed it. Yet when his parents announced a surprise visit to New York, panic set in. He told Charles they needed space for the week. Charles agreed, hurt flickering in his eyes, but he respected the boundary. The visit was torture, forced smiles, questions about dating. Thomas lied through every meal. When his parents left, he collapsed into Charles's arms. I can't keep doing this. Charles stroked his hair. Then don't. I'm not going anywhere. By August, Thomas had started therapy, unpacking years of shame. Charles supported every session, never demanding details. Their love felt stronger, forged in honesty. Thomas began sketching a series called Hidden Light, portraits of men like him finding courage. Charles framed the first one above their bed. Life seemed perfect. But perfection, Thomas would soon learn, was fragile. Fall brought the first betrayal. Mark, the friend Thomas trusted most, had been struggling with his own secrets. One drunken night at a bar, Mark confessed to Charles that Thomas had once joked about Charles's money making life easier. It was a throwaway comment from months earlier, born of insecurity, but Mark twisted it. Charles confronted Thomas the next morning over coffee. Is that how you see me? A safety net. The hurt in his voice cut deep. Thomas denied it, tears rising. I love you. Not your wallet. They argued for hours, voices raw. Thomas stormed out, walking the streets until dawn. When he returned, Charles was waiting with open arms. I believe you. But we have to be honest, always. They made up slowly, the misunderstanding exposing cracks Thomas hadn't noticed. Work stress compounded everything. Thomas landed a big freelance project, but deadlines crushed him. Charles picked up the slack at home without complaint. Elena called more often, her questions pointed. Charles seems happier than ever. You're good for him financially. Thomas brushed it off, but the seed of doubt grew. At Thanksgiving, Charles's family hosted a dinner. Thomas attended, heart pounding. Elena pulled him aside again. We all worry about gold diggers in our circle. Just saying. Thomas excused himself, chest tight. Later he told Charles, who confronted his sister. The family tension simmered. Winter holidays tested them further. Thomas flew home alone for Christmas, the lies heavier than ever. His father clapped him on the back. Proud of you, son. Working hard. Guilt choked him. On the phone with Charles each night, he whispered, I miss you. Charles sent photos of the loft decorated for both of them. New Year's brought resolution. Thomas promised himself he would come out to his family soon. But fate intervened first. In January, Charles started coughing persistently. He dismissed it as a cold. Thomas noticed the weight loss, the fatigue. "See a doctor," he begged. Charles finally went. The diagnosis came in February: advanced lung cancer. Charles had known for weeks, but hidden it, not wanting to burden Thomas. "I wanted us to have normal time," he said quietly in the doctor's office. Thomas's world cracked. He held Charles through the tears, vowing to fight beside him. Treatments began immediately, chemo that left Charles weak but determined. Thomas quit freelancing to care for him full-time, cooking soft meals, holding his hand through nausea. Their friends rallied. Mark apologized profusely for the earlier betrayal, proving his loyalty by driving them to appointments. The months blurred in hospital visits and quiet nights. Charles grew thinner, but his love never wavered. "You're the best decision I ever made," he told Thomas one evening, voice hoarse. Thomas sketched him daily, capturing every moment of strength. The relationship deepened into something unbreakable. Yet society pressed in. When Charles's colleagues learned of his partner, some whispered. Thomas ignored them, focused only on the man he loved. Spring returned, but hope faded. Charles's condition worsened despite treatment. They spent days in the loft, Charles too weak to work. Thomas read to him from old books, cooked his favorite soups, and held him when pain struck. "I don't regret a second," Charles whispered during one bad night. Thomas cried silently, promising to honor their love. Friends visited, but Elena's visits carried tension. She watched Thomas with narrowed eyes, her comments laced with suspicion. "You've been so devoted. Must be hard giving up your career." Thomas bit his tongue. Charles made Thomas promise to live fully after. "Find joy again. Don't hide anymore." Thomas nodded, throat tight. In a quiet moment, Charles dictated a letter for the lawyer, eyes bright with purpose. Thomas didn't ask details. Their final weeks were filled with laughter and tears. They watched old movies, Charles resting his head in Thomas's lap. One sunset, Charles said, "You showed me what real love feels like." "Thank you." Thomas kissed his forehead, memorizing every line of his face. Charles passed peacefully in May, surrounded by Thomas and close friends. The funeral was set for the following week. Thomas moved through arrangements in a fog, Mark at his side. Elena handled the arrangements with cold efficiency, barely speaking to Thomas. The day of the service arrived under gray skies. Thomas stood by the casket in a simple black suit Charles had bought him. Mourners offered condolences, but Elena's glare burned. As the crowd gathered, she stepped forward. "This man used my brother for money. He's nothing but a gold digger." Whispers spread like wildfire. Thomas stood frozen, grief and rage mixing. The accusations flew, whispers of opportunism, of faking love for luxury. Mark tried to defend him, but the damage was done. Thomas felt the weight of every hidden year, every doubt, crashing down. The lawyer arrived just as the service ended, calling everyone to the reading of the will in the adjacent hall. Thomas sat in the front row, numb. Elena smirked across the aisle, certain justice would prevail. The room filled with relatives and colleagues, tension thick. The lawyer cleared his throat and began. "I, Charles Harrington, being of sound mind." The words echoed as the lawyer read the formalities. Thomas stared at the floor, replaying Elena's accusation. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, expecting the bulk of the estate, millions in properties, investments, the firm, to go to family. Elena leaned forward, triumphant. Then the lawyer reached the key section. "To my beloved partner, Thomas Riley, I leave the entirety of my estate, including the Brooklyn loft, the Hamptons cabin, all financial holdings, and controlling interest in Harrington Designs. This is not charity. It is recognition of the man who taught me the true meaning of love." Gasps rippled through the room. Elena shot to her feet. "This can't be right." The lawyer continued calmly. "Attached is a personal letter from Charles to Thomas, to be read privately, but I will share the relevant portion here at his request. Thomas, if you're hearing this, know I saw your heart from day one. You never asked for a dime. You gave me laughter when I was lonely, courage when I was scared, and love when I needed it most. The money is yours to use as you see fit, perhaps to help others like us who hide in silence. Live openly. Be happy. I love you always." Silence swallowed the hall. Elena's face drained of color. Relatives exchanged stunned glances. Thomas sat motionless, tears streaming. The accusations hung in the air, now hollow. Mark squeezed his shoulder. The lawyer passed Thomas the envelope. Outside, rain had stopped. Thomas stepped into the fresh air, the weight of 2 years crashing over him. He had lost the man he loved, but gained something Charles had always tried to give: permission to be himself. That night in the empty loft, Thomas read the full letter alone. Charles detailed every memory: the coffee shop, the cabin, the fights that made them stronger. "You weren't a gold digger. You were my anchor," Thomas sobbed, the truth finally sinking in. The next days brought calls from family, his own parents, shocked by the news Mark had gently shared. His mother cried on the phone. "We didn't know. Come home when you're ready." Elena sent a terse apology email, admitting her fear had blinded her. Thomas didn't respond immediately. He needed time. Weeks blurred into months. Thomas threw himself into managing the estate, but not for luxury. He kept the loft simple, sold the Hamptons cabin to fund a scholarship for young LGBT artists struggling with identity. He contacted organizations in New York, quietly donating and volunteering. Mark stayed close. Their friendship mended stronger. "You honored him perfectly," Mark said one evening over the same Thai takeout. Thomas smiled faintly. Therapy continued, unpacking grief and the years of hiding. He began sketching again, new series called After the Rain, Portraits of Resilience. 1 year later, Thomas stood at the same cemetery on the anniversary, placing flowers. He spoke aloud to Charles. "I came out to my family. They're trying. I'm living openly now." The wind rustled the leaves, almost like an answer. Back in the city, he met a young designer at a gallery opening, nervous, questioning, much like he once was. Thomas offered quiet guidance, paying forward the acceptance Charles had given him. Life moved forward, not without pain, but with purpose. Thomas kept the silver watch, checking it often. The will had silenced the room that day, but it had also freed him. He no longer questioned his worth. Love had never been about money. It had been about the man who saw him completely. Was Thomas truly a gold digger, or was the real treasure the courage to love openly? True or false?